The stranger rode into Cody, Wyoming on a dust-covered mare, his weathered hat pulled low against the afternoon sun of August 1883, and what he saw slumped against the general store made his chest tighten with recognition of suffering he knew too well. The woman sitting there looked like she had been carved from hunger itself, her cheekbones jutting sharply beneath skin that seemed stretched too thin, her eyes hollow and distant as they stared at nothing in particular. Kieran McCoy had seen that look before, on soldiers after the war, on settlers who had lost everything to drought or disease, and something in him could not simply ride past and pretend he had not seen. He dismounted slowly, tying his horse to the hitching post while keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. The woman did not even look up as his boots struck the wooden planks of the walkway, her listlessness speaking volumes about how long she had been without proper sustenance. Her dress, once probably a pretty calico pattern, hung on her frame like a sack, and her hands folded in her lap were little more than bones wrapped in pale skin. "Madam," Kieran said quietly, crouching down to bring himself to her eye level, "when did you last eat?" Her eyes flickered toward him, a dull green that might have sparkled with life under different circumstances. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, seeming to lack even the energy for conversation. A small shake of her head was all she could manage. Kieran felt something shift in his chest, a fierce protective instinct he had not felt in years. "Let me cook you a proper meal today," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "No arguments, no questions right now, just food." The woman blinked at him, confusion crossing her features as though kindness was a language she had forgotten how to understand. "I cannot pay you," she whispered, her voice cracked and dry. "Did not ask you to," Kieran replied, already making his decision. He stood and offered her his hand. "I have got a camp just outside town, by the river. Got supplies enough for a decent meal. You look like you could use about 10 of them, but we will start with one." For a long moment, she simply stared at his outstretched hand as though it might be a mirage. Then, with movements that seemed to take all her remaining strength, she placed her trembling fingers in his palm. Her hand was so light, so fragile, that Kieran had to fight to keep his expression neutral. Anger burned in him, not at her, but at whatever circumstances had brought her to this state. He helped her to her feet and she swayed slightly, forcing him to steady her with his other hand at her elbow. "Easy now," he murmured. "My horse can carry us both, it is not far." "I should not," she began, but her protest was weak. "You should," Kieran countered, "and you will." "What is your name?" "Lydia," she said after a pause. "Lydia Lambert." "Kieran McCoy," he introduced himself, guiding her toward his mare. "And I promise you, Miss Lambert, I am just a man who cannot stand to see someone starving when I have the means to help." Getting Lydia onto the horse required care and patience. She had so little strength that Kieran essentially had to lift her into the saddle, then mount behind her, keeping one arm around her waist to ensure she did not slide off. She was stiff at first, clearly uncomfortable with the proximity to a stranger, but exhaustion soon won out and she sagged against him, her head drooping forward. The ride to his camp took less than 15 minutes, but Kieran spent every moment of it acutely aware of how little she weighed, how her breathing was shallow and uneven. He had questions, dozens of them, but they could wait. Right now, the only thing that mattered was getting food into her before her body gave out entirely. His camp was simple but well-maintained, situated beneath a stand of cottonwoods near the Shoshone River. A canvas tent stood against the weather, a fire ring surrounded by stones sat ready for use, and his supplies were neatly organized in wooden crates covered with oilcloth. He had been in Cody for 3 weeks, doing odd jobs and ranch work while deciding whether to settle in the area or move on. That decision suddenly felt less pressing than the woman who needed his help. Kieran dismounted first, then carefully helped Lydia down, guiding her to sit on a log he had positioned near the fire ring. "Just rest," he told her. "I will have something ready soon." He worked quickly, building up the fire with practiced efficiency, filling his coffee pot with water from the river, and pulling out supplies from his stores. Beans, bacon, cornmeal, a precious onion he had been saving, some dried herbs, and a tin of peaches he had bought as a luxury. It was not fancy cooking, but it would be hot, filling, and nutritious. As the fire caught and grew, Kieran set his Dutch oven in the coals and began preparing the meal. He sliced the bacon into strips, letting the fat render out and fill the air with its rich aroma. The onion went in next, chopping it fine and adding it to the sizzling meat. Lydia's eyes followed his movements with a kind of desperate intensity that made his heart ache. "How long?" he asked quietly, stirring the onion and bacon together. "How long what?" Her voice was barely audible over the crackling fire. "How long since you ate properly?" Silence stretched between them, broken only by the sounds of cooking and the river flowing nearby. When she finally spoke, her words came slowly, as though each one cost her something. "My husband died 4 months ago. Cholera. We had a small claim about 40 miles east of here trying to make a farm. After he passed, I tried to keep going, but the well dried up and the crops failed. I sold what I could, but it was not enough. I came to town 3 weeks ago, thinking I could find work, but no one wants to hire a woman with no skills, no references, no family." Kieran added beans and water to the pot, seasoning it with salt and the dried herbs. "You have been on the streets for 3 weeks. I slept in the livery stable when the owner was not looking, did washing for scraps when I could, but the last few days I just could not anymore." Her voice broke slightly. "I was not trying to give up, but my body would not listen." "You are not giving up," Kieran said firmly, meeting her eyes. "You survived. That takes more strength than most people ever need to find." He poured her coffee, strong and black, and handed her the tin cup. "Drink this slowly. Your stomach needs to wake up gentle." Lydia wrapped both hands around the cup as though it was precious, bringing it to her lips and taking tiny sips. The warmth seemed to bring a little color to her cheeks, or perhaps that was just the firelight. Kieran found himself studying her face, seeing past the hollow cheeks and the exhaustion to the woman beneath. She could not be much past 25, he guessed, with fine features and that thick auburn hair, currently pinned up haphazardly, that would probably fall in waves down her back. He looked away, focusing on his cooking. It was not appropriate to think of her that way, not when she was in such a vulnerable state. She needed help, not unwanted attention from a stranger. The meal took time to prepare properly, and Kieran was glad for it. Lydia needed to ease into eating, and the coffee would help prepare her system. He made johnnycakes from the cornmeal, cooking them in the bacon fat until they were golden and crispy around the edges. The beans simmered until they were soft, absorbing the flavors of the meat and onion. When everything was ready, he dished up a modest portion onto a tin plate, knowing that too much too fast would make her sick. "Start with this," he said, handing her the plate and a fork. "Eat slowly. I know you want to devour it, but your stomach will punish you if you do." Lydia took the plate with trembling hands, staring down at the food as though she could not quite believe it was real. Then, with visible effort at restraint, she took a small bite of the johnnycake. Her eyes closed, and a sound somewhere between a sob and a sigh escaped her lips. Kieran looked away, giving her privacy in the moment, and fixed his own plate. They ate in silence for a while, the only sounds the fire popping and the evening birds beginning their songs in the trees. He watched her from the corner of his eye, ready to intervene if she ate too quickly, but she was being careful, taking small bites and pausing between them. "This is the best thing I have ever tasted," she said eventually, her voice stronger than before. "Thank you does not seem like enough." "It is just camp food," Kieran replied, though her words warmed him more than he wanted to admit. "But you are welcome." "Why did you help me?" The question was direct, her green eyes studying him with newfound alertness. Men do not usually offer kindness without expecting something in return. Kieran set down his fork, considering his answer carefully. "I was at Shiloh," he said finally. "During the war. Saw men dying of their wounds, yes, but also saw them dying of hunger, of disease, of despair. Saw that same look in your eyes today, that look of someone who has reached the end of their rope. I swore when I came home that if I ever had the chance to pull someone back from that edge, I would. No strings, no expectations, just because it is the right thing to do." Lydia was quiet for a long moment, her gaze dropping to her plate. "Not many men think that way." "Maybe not, but I am not most men." He refilled her coffee cup. "What will you do now?" "I do not know," she admitted. "I have no money, no prospects. I suppose I will try to find work again, though I do not know what good it will do." "Can you cook?" Kieran asked. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Better than I can farm, apparently. My mother ran a boarding house in St. Louis before she passed. I grew up cooking for a dozen hungry boarders at a time." An idea was forming in Kieran's mind, but he pushed it aside for now. "Eat some more," he encouraged. "There is plenty and you need it." As the evening deepened into twilight, Kieran kept the fire going and made sure Lydia ate 2 full plates of food, along with half the tin of peaches for dessert. The transformation was already remarkable. Color had returned to her face, her eyes were brighter, and she sat up straighter, no longer sagging with exhaustion. "I have a bedroll you can use," Kieran said when she finally declared herself full. "You can sleep in the tent tonight. I will stay out here by the fire." "I cannot take your tent," Lydia protested. "You can and you will," Kieran said firmly. "I have slept under the stars more nights than I can count. One more will not hurt me. Besides, you need proper rest and you need to feel safe to get it." She looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. "You really do not want anything from me, do you?" "I want you to survive," Kieran said simply. "I want you to get your strength back and figure out what comes next. That is all." Tears welled up in Lydia's eyes, spilling over before she could stop them. "I was so scared," she whispered. "I thought I was going to die in that town, and no one would even notice or care." Kieran moved to sit beside her on the log, close but not touching, letting his presence offer comfort without crowding her. "Someone noticed. Someone cared. And you are not going to die, Lydia Lambert. You are going to live, and you are going to figure out how to build a new life. I will help you however I can." She turned toward him, her tear-streaked face illuminated by the firelight. "Why? You do not even know me." "Maybe that is exactly why," Kieran said. "No complications, no history, just one human being helping another. Sometimes that is the purest kind of kindness." Lydia wiped at her tears with the back of her hand. "You are a strange man, Kieran McCoy. I have been called worse." He smiled slightly. "Come on. Let me show you where you will sleep." He led her to the tent, showing her the bedroll already laid out, the extra blanket folded at the foot, the canvas providing shelter from the elements. "If you need anything during the night, just call out. I will hear you." "Thank you," she said again. And this time the words carried a weight of genuine emotion that spoke of more than just gratitude for a meal. Kieran nodded and left her to her privacy, returning to the fire where he settled in for the night. He kept the flames going, both for warmth and because the light was comforting. His mind was racing with thoughts and plans. Lydia needed more than just one meal and one night of safety. She needed time to recover, to regain her strength, and then she needed a way forward. The idea that had sparked earlier returned, more fully formed now. He had been thinking about settling down, maybe starting a small ranch or buying into an existing operation. He had money saved from his years of work, money he had been hesitant to spend because spending it meant making a commitment to a place and a future. But maybe, just maybe, he could use that money to help not only himself but Lydia as well. The next morning, Kieran woke before dawn, as was his habit, and set about making breakfast. More coffee, more Johnny cakes, eggs from a small supply he had, and the rest of the bacon. By the time Lydia emerged from the tent, looking considerably better than she had the previous evening, the smell of cooking food filled the camp. "Good morning," she said, her voice still a bit tentative but stronger. "Morning," Kieran replied, pouring her coffee. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," she admitted. "I actually feel almost human again." "Good, sit down and eat. We have things to discuss." Over breakfast, Kieran laid out his idea. "I have been thinking about buying some land, starting a ranch. Nothing huge, just enough to run some cattle and horses, maybe have a vegetable garden. I have the money saved for it. What I do not have is someone who can cook and manage a household. You need work and a place to stay. Seems like we could help each other." Lydia stared at him, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth. "You are offering me a job. I am offering you a position as a housekeeper and cook with room and board included plus wages. Fair wages. Nothing inappropriate, nothing improper. You would have your own space, your own privacy. I would expect meals, cleaning, help with the garden, that sort of thing. In return, you get security, food, and a chance to save your own money to do whatever you want with your future. You thought of all this since last night." Her voice was skeptical but hopeful. "I have been thinking about the ranch for months. You are the piece that makes it actually workable." Kieran met her eyes steadily. "I am not saying it would be easy. Building something from nothing never is. But it would be honest work, and you would be safe and fed. That is more than you have right now." Lydia set down her fork, her hands folding in her lap. "What if people talk? A single woman living on a ranch with a single man." "People always talk," Kieran said, "but we will do everything properly. We can get the local preacher to vouch for the arrangement if needed. Your quarters will be separate from mine. Anyone who wants to judge can mind their own business. You have thought of everything, have you not?" "I try to." He refilled both their coffee cups. "Look, I know this is sudden. I know you have no reason to trust me beyond what I have shown you in the last 12 hours. So here is what I propose. Give me a week. Stay here at camp, let me cook for you and help you get your strength back. We can ride into town, talk to people, let you ask around about me. If after a week you decide this is not for you, I will give you enough money to get yourself set up somewhere else. No strings attached. But if you decide to take the job, we will go look at properties and start building something real." Lydia's eyes were bright again, but this time with unshed tears of hope rather than despair. A week, Kieran confirmed. "What do you say?" She took a deep breath, then extended her hand across the fire. "A week, and Kieran, thank you for seeing me when everyone else looked away." He shook her hand, her grip still weak but present, and felt that shift in his chest again, that sense of something significant beginning. "You are worth seeing, Lydia Lambert. Do not ever forget that." The week that followed changed both their lives in ways neither could have predicted. Kieran kept his promise, cooking 3 solid meals a day and making sure Lydia rested and recovered. She protested at first, insisting she should help, but he was firm that her job for now was simply to heal. On the 3rd day, she was strong enough to walk into town with him. Cody was a young town, founded just 2 years earlier, full of the rough energy of a place still defining itself. Kieran introduced her to the people he had worked for, the owners of the general store, the banker, the preacher. Everyone confirmed that Kieran McCoy was a hard-working, honest man who kept his word and paid his debts. The preacher, a kindly man named Reverend Thomas, pulled Lydia aside while Kieran was looking at saddles. "That man pulled my son from a flooding creek last month, risked his own life to do it. If he has offered to help you, you can trust that offer. He is one of the good ones." Those words settled something in Lydia's heart. That evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, she said, "I do not need the full week. I will take the job if the offer still stands." Kieran looked up from the piece of leather he was mending. "You are sure?" "I am sure." She smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. "Let us build a ranch, Kieran McCoy." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. They found a property 10 miles north of Cody, 200 acres with good water from a creek that fed off the Shoshone River. There was a small existing cabin that needed work but was structurally sound, and a barn that needed even more work but was usable. The price was fair, and Kieran bought it outright with half his savings. They moved onto the property in early September, and Kieran immediately set about making the cabin livable. He built a partition down the middle, creating 2 separate rooms for propriety's sake. Lydia got the larger room with the fireplace, while Kieran took the smaller room with a window facing east. It was tight quarters, but they made it work. Lydia threw herself into making the place a home. She scrubbed every surface until it shone, sewed curtains for the windows from fabric bought in town, and organized the kitchen area with an efficiency that came from years of practice. Kieran focused on the barn and the land, repairing fences, clearing brush, and preparing for the cattle he planned to buy in the spring. They fell into a rhythm, working side by side during the day and sitting by the fire in the evenings, talking about their plans, their pasts, their dreams. Kieran learned that Lydia had grown up in St. Louis, the daughter of a widow who worked herself to exhaustion to provide for her children. Lydia had married young, to a man who seemed kind but turned out to be better at dreaming than doing. She did not speak ill of her late husband, but Kieran could read between the lines. Lydia learned that Kieran had grown up on a farm in Ohio, that the war had taken him at 18 and spit him out 4 years later a changed man. He had spent the years since drifting, working where he could, saving his money, trying to figure out who he was supposed to be now that the fighting was over. "I think I am supposed to be a rancher," he said one evening, staring into the flames. "I think I am supposed to build something that lasts, something that matters." "Then that is what we will do," Lydia said simply, and Kieran felt that warmth in his chest again, that sense of rightness he had not felt in years. As fall deepened into winter, something else began to grow between them, something neither had anticipated but both felt powerfully. It started with small things. The way Kieran made sure Lydia's coffee was exactly how she liked it every morning. The way Lydia mended his shirts without being asked, taking extra care with the stitching. The accidental brush of hands when passing plates. The lingering looks across the room when they thought the other was not watching. Kieran tried to keep his feelings in check. Lydia was his employee, dependent on him for her livelihood and security. It would be wrong to put pressure on her, to make her feel obligated to return feelings she might not share. But it was getting harder to ignore the way his heart beat faster when she smiled, the way he found excuses to be near her, the way he lay awake at night thinking about her just on the other side of that thin partition. Lydia was fighting her own battle. She had told herself she would never depend on a man again after her husband's death left her destitute. But Kieran was different from any man she had ever known. He was strong but gentle, hardworking but always had time to talk, confident but never arrogant. He treated her like an equal, valued her opinions, made her feel capable and worthy. And he was handsome, with those blue eyes that seemed to see right through to her soul and that quiet smile that made her stomach flutter. The turning point came on a cold December evening when a snowstorm trapped them in the cabin for 3 days. They had plenty of supplies and firewood, so there was no danger, but the enforced closeness made it impossible to maintain the careful distance they had been keeping. On the second day, as the wind howled outside and snow piled against the windows, they sat by the fire playing cards and talking. The conversation drifted to loneliness, to the ache of going through life without someone to share it with. "You ever think about marrying again?" Kieran asked, then immediately looked like he regretted the question. "I am sorry, that is too personal." "No, it is all right," Lydia said, setting down her cards. "I think about it sometimes, but I am afraid. My first marriage was not what I hoped for, and being left alone like that, so helpless, it terrified me. I swore I would never put myself in that position again." "That is understandable," Kieran said quietly, "but not all marriages are like that. If two people truly partner with each other, truly share the work and the decisions and the life, it is different." "Is that the kind of marriage you would want?" Lydia asked, her heart pounding. Kieran looked at her, really looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "Yes. With the right person, that is exactly what I would want." "And what would the right person be like?" The question was barely a whisper. "She would be strong," Kieran said, his voice low. "Strong enough to survive things that would break most people. She would be kind but not weak, practical but with dreams still alive in her heart. She would be someone I could talk to, work beside, build a life with. She would be someone who makes me want to be better than I am." Lydia's eyes were locked on his. "She sounds wonderful." "She is." Kieran stood, moving closer but still keeping a respectful distance. "Lydia, I know the arrangement between us is professional. I know you came here for safety and security, not for complications, but I have to be honest with you. Over these past months, you have become so much more to me than an employee or even a friend. I care about you, deeply. And if there is any chance you might feel the same, I would like permission to court you properly." Lydia rose to her feet, her hands clasped together to stop them from shaking. "You want to court me?" "I do. But only if you want that too. If you do not, we will never speak of it again and nothing will change between us. You will still have your job, your home, your security. I give you my word on that." Tears spilled down Lydia's cheeks, but she was smiling. "You really are the strangest man I have ever met, Kieran McCoy. Who asks permission to court someone?" "I do," he said simply. "Because your choice matters. You matter." Lydia crossed the space between them, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "You saw me at my lowest, when I was nothing but hollow cheeks and desperation, and you offered me kindness without conditions. You gave me back my life. You made me feel human again, feel worthy again. How could I not care for you?" "Is that a yes?" Kieran asked, his own voice rough with emotion. "That is a yes," Lydia confirmed, and then she kissed him. It was a gentle kiss, tentative and sweet, full of promise and hope. Kieran's arms came around her carefully, as though she might break, and she leaned into his strength, letting herself trust, letting herself feel safe in a way she never had before. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "So," Kieran said, "I suppose we should tell Reverend Thomas that the nature of our arrangement has changed." Lydia laughed, the sound bright and joyful. "I suppose we should, though I imagine half the town has been speculating about us anyway." "Let them speculate," Kieran said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "As long as I get to keep you, I do not care what anyone thinks." The courtship that followed was unconventional given that they already lived together, but they made it work. Kieran was scrupulously proper, making sure they were never in compromising situations, always treating Lydia with respect and care. He brought her wildflowers when he found them, read to her in the evenings from the books they had, and talked with her about every decision regarding the ranch. In the spring of 1884, Kieran used the rest of his savings to buy cattle and 2 good horses. The ranch was officially in operation, and Lydia was right there beside him, learning to ride, helping with the branding, managing the accounts and supplies with the skills she had learned from her mother. On a warm evening in May, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, Kieran took Lydia's hand. "I love you," he said simply. "I think I started falling in love with you the moment you took that first bite of food and I saw the life come back into your eyes. I want to marry you, Lydia. I want to build this life with you, not as employer and employee, but as partners in everything. Will you marry me?" Lydia turned to him, her green eyes shining. "I love you too. You saved my life, but more than that, you taught me how to live again. You taught me that I am strong, that I am worthy, that I deserve happiness. Yes, Kieran, I will marry you." They were married in June, in a simple ceremony at the church in Cody with half the town in attendance. Lydia wore a dress of soft blue that matched Kieran's eyes, and Kieran wore his best suit, looking more handsome than Lydia had ever seen him. Reverend Thomas performed the ceremony, speaking about love, partnership, and the strength that comes from facing life together. When Kieran kissed his bride, sealing their vows, the whole congregation erupted in applause. They were well liked in Cody, known for their hard work, their kindness, and the way they had helped each other rise from difficult circumstances. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered, growing slowly but steadily. Kieran proved to be an excellent rancher, with an instinct for cattle and horses that served them well. Lydia managed the household with efficiency and grace, but she was also a full partner in the business, her ideas and insights valued equally with Kieran's. In the spring of 1885, Lydia discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and a little fear, but mostly joy. Kieran became even more protective, fussing over her in ways that made her laugh and occasionally roll her eyes, but she loved him for it. Their son was born in November, a healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determination. They named him Samuel James McCoy, and he became the center of their world. Kieran was a devoted father, gentle and patient, teaching his son everything he knew as Sam grew. Lydia was a loving mother, firm but kind, making sure their home was filled with laughter and warmth. 2 years later, a daughter joined the family, a bright-eyed girl they named Caroline Rose. She was as fierce as her mother and as steady as her father, and she kept them all on their toes from the moment she could walk. The ranch continued to grow, becoming one of the most respected operations in the area. Kieran and Lydia hired hands to help with the work, always making sure to treat their employees fairly and with respect, remembering their own struggles. They became known for giving chances to people who needed them, hiring drifters and helping them find their footing, just as Kieran had once helped Lydia. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Kieran and Lydia stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching their children play in the yard while the sun set over the land they had built together. The cabin had been added onto over the years, growing into a proper house with multiple rooms, a real kitchen, and even a parlor for entertaining. "You remember the first time you saw me?" Lydia asked, leaning against her husband's side. "Every detail," Kieran replied, his arm around her waist. "You were sitting against that store wall, so thin I could see the bones in your face, and I thought my heart might break at the sight of you. You said you would cook me a proper meal, Lydia recalled, smiling at the memory. You did so much more than that. We did it together, Kieran corrected. I might have offered the hand up, but you are the one who grabbed hold and climbed. You are the one who had the strength to keep going. We make a good team, Lydia said, turning to kiss him. The best team, Kieran agreed. I love you, Lydia McCoy. Every single day, I love you more. And I love you, Kieran. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for feeding me when I was starving, not just for food, but for hope. Thank you for building this life with me. They stood together as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, their children's laughter floating on the evening breeze, the cattle lowing in the distance, the life they had created surrounding them with warmth and security. From desperate beginnings had grown something beautiful and lasting, a testament to kindness, courage, and the transformative power of love. In the years that followed, the McCoy Ranch became a landmark in the Cody area. Kieran and Lydia raised their children to be strong, compassionate people who understood the value of hard work and the importance of helping others. Samuel grew into a fine rancher himself, eventually taking over more and more of the daily operations as Kieran aged. Caroline married a schoolteacher and started a school on the edge of the McCoy property, educating the children of ranch families who lived too far from town for regular schooling. Kieran and Lydia added another son to their family when Caroline was 5, a surprise baby they named Henry after Kieran's father. Henry became the family peacemaker, with a gift for words and negotiation that eventually led him to study law. As they entered their 50s and then their 60s, Kieran and Lydia settled into the role of grandparents, delighting in the children Samuel and Caroline brought into the world. The main house was often full of noise and chaos as grandchildren ran through the rooms, and Kieran and Lydia would not have had it any other way. On quiet evenings, they still sat on the porch together, holding hands and watching the sunset, marveling at how far they had come from that day in August 1883, when a cowboy noticed a starving woman and decided he could not ride past without helping. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not stopped? Lydia asked one such evening, her hair now streaked with silver but her green eyes still bright. No, Kieran said firmly, because I did stop. That is the only reality that matters. And I would make the same choice 1,000 times over. Even knowing all the hard times we have faced, Lydia teased gently. The droughts, the cattle diseases, the winters that nearly broke us. Especially knowing those things, Kieran replied. Because we faced them together and they made us stronger. You made me stronger. You gave my life meaning beyond just surviving. You gave me a family, a home, a purpose. You gave me those things too, Lydia said softly. You gave me back my life when I had lost everything, including hope. You showed me what real love looks like, what a real partnership can be. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the way couples who have been together for decades can, needing no words to communicate their contentment. The ranch stretched out before them, the land they had nurtured and protected, the legacy they would leave to their children and grandchildren. As the stars emerged one by one in the vast Wyoming sky, Kieran pulled Lydia closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. They had lived a good life, full of love and purpose and meaning. From hunger and desperation had grown abundance and joy. From a single act of kindness had blossomed a lifetime of love. And when they finally left the porch to go inside to the home they had built together, to the bed they had shared for over 40 years, they did so hand in hand, still partners in all things, still deeply and completely in love. The story of the cowboy who saw a starving woman and offered to cook her a meal became family legend, told and retold to each new generation of McCoys. It became a reminder that kindness matters, that seeing people in their suffering and choosing to help can change the entire course of a life. It became a call to always look for those who need help, to always extend a hand, to always choose compassion over indifference. And long after Kieran and Lydia had passed on, leaving behind a thriving ranch and a large, loving family, that story continued to inspire. The McCoy Ranch continued to be known as a place where people in need could find help, where second chances were given freely, where the values of the couple who started it all were honored and preserved. Because on a dusty day in August 1883, a cowboy named Kieran McCoy saw past the hollow cheeks and the desperation to the woman beneath, a woman named Lydia Lambert who just needed someone to care. He said, "Let me cook you a proper meal today," and in doing so, he changed both their lives forever. He gave her food, yes, but also hope, dignity, safety, and eventually love. She gave him purpose, partnership, family, and a love that lasted a lifetime. Their story was one of the American West at its best, a tale of survival and strength, of building something from nothing, of two people who found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, and created a life together that was rich in all the ways that truly matter. It was a reminder that the greatest adventures often begin with the smallest acts of kindness, and that love, when it is real and true, can transform everything. The end.